Welcome back to the VHS Club. We are hanging out with our special guest, not in the comments, but here hanging out in real life. Kimberly is here to talk about the usual suspects. We're so
finally.
Yeah, exactly. We've been ignoring this request for a while, not because we don't want to watch this movie, but because there's so many 90s movies. And, there's a lot of 90s movies. This podcast is going to be around forever. We're never,
Love it.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. And we have Paul in the live comments hanging out, but Paul didn't do his homework. He did not watch the movie, so he's not allowed to comment. No, just kidding.
Womp, womp, womp. Come on, Paul.
Paul, you'll have to let us know if you've ever seen this movie, because I'm sad to say there may be spoilers in this episode. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to log off now.
This is one where you want to keep the spoilers away from it before you see it.
Yeah. There were a few movies that came out in this era where they were there was not a lot of internet around. So so spoilers were a little less intense than they can be now. So there were a lot of these really big twisty turny plot movies where it was shocking when you saw it. And if you didn't see it originally, it was over for you. You were going to find out what happened. Oh gosh.
Sure, well, you'd walk into the theater and other people would be like, "Did you know?" It's like, "Shh, we're here to see it."
Yeah, really.
People are
you know who did it?
I'm here to see it for my third time. I'm like, shush.
Well, that is so. Actually, okay. Let's start with the disclaimer. So Nat and I, and we mentioned this to Kimberly as well. Slight disclaimer on this one. There are people who are in this movie who used to be awesome, amazing, incredible actors, and are still awesome, amazing, incredible actors.
And directors and producers.
Yeah. But turns out that they're also not great people. So we're just gonna put that aside for this movie review. And
we will say that we agree they should be in jail.
We agree that they should be in jail, and
we'll leave it.
And that fits with the movie, right?
Exactly.
It does.
Exactly.
It does.
It fits with the movie. But as this is not an overly serious podcast, we are going to say we are aware of it. We completely agree, but we're going to do a good movie review of this anyway. And we kind of mentioned this last time anyway, because what was the other movie we had with Kevin Spacey where we had to put that aside? LA Confidential.
LA Confidential.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say
we're not a fan of Rapey Spacey, but
we're not a fan.
But we're aware that he used to be good at his job.
Oh yeah,
at least he won't work anymore. So but he should be in jail. We are aware.
Vindication. Well, I want to kick this off even before we get into the synopsis of this movie. Paul says he's seen it, so we're okay. Even before we get into this, I want to ask Kimberly first, and then Nat. When you saw this movie, I guess originally, because rewatching it is did you know what the twist would be? Did you figure this one out, or did you get all the way to the end and go, "Oh my goodness, I did not know that this was it"?
Did not know.
Didn't know. Okay, didn't know.
Absolutely
shock of a lifetime. You were beside yourself. Are you the kind of person that normally figures these kinds of things out?
Yeah, I'm good at figuring out complicated plot twists, but this one really got me.
This one got you. All right, Nat.
So I thought I knew when I started watching the movie. As I continued watching the movie, I got totally tricked into thinking I was wrong. The movie gaslit me. And then I was like, I was right. And I was even more shocked because I had spent the whole movie convincing myself that I was wrong in the first place. So it was quite shocking.
But it was kind of written that way, right?
It was kind of written.
More than one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Possible
very well
suspect.
done to trick me out of my own convictions.
I think that's impressive because Nat grew up in like a household and of a personality where she like needs to figure it out. Like we
Always figure out who the
always
murderer
needs to
is.
figure it
Always.
out. And Nat and I are like the polar opposite on that front where like I read probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 murder mystery books like a week at this rate. And I never know. Like I get all the way to the end and I'm like, right, it's a murder mystery. I should be trying to figure out who it was. And I couldn't even go back and tell you any of the clues. Like I'm just so swept up in the story. I'm not detail oriented. I'm not a detail oriented. So I was the same way with this movie. Like I don't remember originally watching it. I know I've seen it because I knew what I remembered scenes of it as I was rewatching it, and I knew the twist. But rewatching it, I still even knowing the twist, and I was like, I'm gonna pay attention this time. I got all the way to the very end, and I was like, oh, I have a lot of questions and feelings, and I'm excited to dive into this movie. So and I will. So Nat, you need to share this piece. So the really fast synopsis of this movie, because there's lots of twists and turns. I'd rather talk about the twists and turns. So the fast synopsis of this movie is that it is told by an unreliable narrator who turns out is the bad guy that they're trying to catch all the way through. It has a lot of flashbacks and flash forwards. It's got a lot of flashing back and forth. And it's telling the story of a series of criminals who are involved in this huge shootout on a boat that goes horribly wrong, and everyone is dead except for Kevin Spacey's character, who turns out is guilty of everything, and it goes back and forth. But Nat is the level of crazy. Kimberly, I'm interested if you're this level of crazy as well, where she this time around was like, well, he says that the bad guys, you find out that the bad guy's name is Kaiser Sose, which if you recognize that name, it's because of this movie. And Nat like knew that she needed to look up like Turkish words and figured out by Googling what the meaning behind the name was. She was like all over the Google research this time around, which is admirable.
So, okay, so I figured, so the whole legend of Kaiser Sose is he was this Turkish man that was betrayed and then murdered everybody and became this like kingpin. Mm-hmm. Before that, even near the beginning of the movie, you see there's a Turkish cigarette box on the police chief's desk. So I was like, okay, Turkish is important. What does Sose mean in Turkish? So I Googled it, and essentially it basically can translate to verbal.
Yep.
And Kevin Spacey's character's name is Kint Verbal.
Yeah.
So he tells them
Kint.
right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Or Verbal Kint. But he tells them his own name. Like he tells them straight, he's like, yeah, I'm Kaiser Sose. I mean, I'm Kint Verbal. Like he tells them right away who he is. And he does it throughout the whole interrogation. Mm-hmm. There's so many times where he says, I couldn't have shot Kaiser Sose, and he holds up his GIMP 10. He has, I think, cerebral palsy. Is that it? So he's slightly deformed, and in the movie they refer to him as a GIMP. We're not saying that
or cripple
or cripple. Yeah, neither of which are appropriate anymore.
Yeah, no. But so he holds up his hand, and it's the sign language for devil's horns, and Kaiser Sose, as per Verbal, is constantly referred to as the devil himself. Mm-hmm. And he holds up the devil's horns to say, I couldn't have killed the devil. I'm like, well, yeah, because you're just mocking the poor cop who's interviewing you. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of little things that you see more the second time you watch it.
Or not if you're me.
Yeah.
or the 10th or 20th time, because you're right. There's like all these little Easter eggs that they kind of plant here and there. And one thing that I noticed that was really prevalent throughout the movie was cigarette smoking.
Yeah.
A lot of a lot of the characters smoke, and always this kind of zooming in on a left hand. I mean, there's a lot of little mannerisms that kind of indicate who the character is. That's the ultimate bad guy. But when you're watching it the first time, you're not wary of that. You're not, aware of those things.
Yeah.
So the thing with the cigarette smoking is they show a lot of people, and traditionally in North America, we smoke with our first 2 fingers, and we hold our cigarette like that. And the way at the end of the movie, we see Kaiser Sose holding his cigarette, and it's through his thumb and his index finger. And Apparently that's a regional Turkish way of smoking a cigarette. Fun fact.
Nat knows everything.
I mean, they did their research when they made this movie.
Well, I'm with Nat on that, because as soon as Katie was like, "Come on, you got to come on the show," I was like, "Oh snap! I got to get these cliff notes together," and I was doing like 20 fun facts and ran into those.
Yay! Good. Good. I'm excited to hear everyone's fun facts. It's always fun to look up like the behind the scenes or the making of, stories that come out of a lot of these movies. I was amazed that this movie was filmed in 25 days and with a $6 million budget. So if you're comparing like this movie, which is, really iconic to some of, we were talking about like a James Cameron movie, for example, like very different, like, level of filmmaking, although still
2 years to film.
Yeah, still like both, Academy Award winning, films. So I like it. It is kind of interesting to see all the different ways to make a movie. I'm loving Paul has dropped in an incredible stat. I have not yet looked this one up, but now that I'm seeing it, it's outrageous. There were only 15,465 movies in the 90s. So at least 15,000 episodes you guys were in. 2,348 were released in the theater. That's actually like staggering to think about that. There were
in 10 years
over 15,000 movies made, but only 2,000-ish were released in the theater. Like what?
Yeah, but
the rest of them were like Steven Seagal movies that went. Oh no, I guess that was.
I was just straight to
VHS or something.
Straight to VHS.
Steven Seagal used to do those straight to TV movies,
probably not in the 90s. Though he was still really popular in the 90s. That was like the 2000s.
But still, straight to video movies. That was Steven Seagal.
Yeah,
he knew how to make money.
Funny.
Yeah, I think we've done mostly theater releases so far, but yeah, we should do some of those straight to VHS movies.
Maybe.
But I was thinking about what you're just saying, Katie, with the budget, the $6 million budget. And when you think about the movie, because I was, I've watched it several times and I was paying more attention this time. And, they didn't really have to elaborate and have a huge fancy set. I mean, there were some shots of New York, LA, but it was mostly hospital, the main scenes were the hospital and there with the victim, the burn victim.
The hospital, the boat, and then
the
interrogation room.
And the interrogation room. Yeah. So they didn't have these elaborate sets.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I mean, you could do a lot with that. Although it is kind of interesting because maybe this movie actually set up a lot of these careers. Like there were a lot of fairly big name actors, or at least recognizable actors in this movie. Maybe they weren't as much at that time, I guess, as Kevin Spacey won the Academy Award for this movie. So I don't know how popular he was prior to this. This is 95, was it? Or 94?
I think it was 95,
95, I think. Yeah.
I think everybody in it was fairly well known already, except for maybe Benicio del Toro.
I have to admit, every time I see him, I'm just like, it's amazing that this guy like
has a job.
It's amazing that he like can barely speak English in most of these movies, and yet he like nails every performance. Like somehow he's different in every movie, but he's like got this like, I don't know, like he's just likable in every movie. Like even when he's a bad guy,
you don't know what he's saying.
Yeah, you have no idea what he's saying, but somehow it's okay that you don't know what he's saying. Like,
in the beginning of this movie, so all of these different criminals get swept up in these trumped up charges. Mm-hmm. So somebody from high up above is like, round all these people up and do a lineup, which is like the famous movie box cover for it, or movie poster cover. Yep. And then they all get put into a jail cell and they're talking. And when he says his lines, you notice Kevin Pollak is laughing, and it's because he literally couldn't understand a word he said. The whole cast, like after Benicio del Toro gives his lines of like what he does, like why he's a criminal, and nobody knew what he was saying, and they just thought it was so funny they kept it in. They're like, that's perfect.
Yeah.
They just pretended to know what they're saying.
They kept in a lot of that. They kept in a lot of that. Apparently that was a similar experience for the lineup scene. So like the lineup scene was supposed to be this like very serious scene, and the actors just couldn't stop like laughing and being silly. And so eventually they were like, fine, whatever, we'll use one of those takes. And just kept it in.
Baldwin acts completely unhinged, and it's Also, I
And
mean, the
what's
scene
the line
itself
that
had
they
to
had
be
to say?
comical. Something about cocksucker.
Yeah, and they all say it
Like,
like slightly differently, and I mean, yeah, it totally, yeah, it was brilliant, and their intonation and all of it, it was awesome.
well, the funny thing about his character, was it Fencer? Fencer, I think it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
He kind of seemed like he was playing a character who's kind of high or something, or
He
possibly
comes
high.
across pretty stoned all the time.
Yeah.
Baldwin's
So there's
character
that
too. I'm
element.
like, he is unhinged. Like, what is he on? He needs a downer. Like he's just so over the top all the time. And I love at the end of the movie, he's like, so he's clearly a sociopath. They have that throughout the whole movie. He's emotionally, he just always wants to go gunning people down and murdering everybody. And then at the end of the movie, he's supposed to be the calm sniper. I'm like, I feel like that was not a good part of this plan on their last heist.
You mean Billy,
Here Paul has it. It's give me the keys. Give me the keys, you fucking cocksucker.
Yes, thank you, Paul.
Today's episode is explicit. We're sorry.
Sorry. But we're just quoting the movie, everybody.
We're just quoting a movie. Yeah, give us a break. Oh, too funny.
So now, are you referring to McManus, Billy Baldwin's character?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Billy Baldwin.
Yeah.
I said Stephen Baldwin.
One
one of the Baldwins.
I think it is.
Or is it Stephen? I'm sorry.
I think it is. Yeah. It's one of them.
One of the two blonder Baldwins.
Yeah. One of the two blonde. Not Alec. It's not Alec Baldwin. Yeah. You know, it's funny, like, and maybe this is my own, like, so I got hyper fixated this entire movie, partially because I was like trying to be more observant, which again is not a skill of mine. I just kept focusing on the fact that everything that we know about these characters and everything that we're seeing are all flashbacks of a story being told by an unreliable narrator. So like none of these like characters' personalities or how they interact or anything that's happening is necessarily accurate. Because I knew that it was him throughout the movie, rather than focusing on all of the cool things that like set it up to figure it out, I was just like, I can't believe anything that this guy is saying. Like their personalities, the conversations that they're having with each other, like how all of this is going down, how they relate to him, like how they relate to each other. Like all of that is a story that Kevin Spacey's character is telling. To like all of those flashbacks are not necessarily accurate, and even if he was telling it truthfully, like remembering all of the details in stressful moments wouldn't be but it wasn't anyway. It was all a lie anyway. So it's like it's kind of interesting that like it's one of those movies where it has to be so flawlessly planned out and scripted because you have to be able to tell the story, and you know everyone is going to go back and rewatch it to try to see if they can figure out like all of the details. But the actual like character development and how the characters interact and what the actual story isn't as relevant as putting in those little details, because in the end it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that Kevin Spacey is Kaiser Sose, and what are those things that he made
he got away with it.
That made the cop realize it at the end and is the reason why he got away with it. The whole rest of the movie is a bit of a red herring. Like it's completely irrelevant. Like none of it matters, which I thought was kind of interesting.
The opening scene takes place in the present. So when the movie starts, it has the lovely opening credits, the great sort of like, elegant gangster score. And it's so the opening scene, when we see, it's the aftermath of the boat is on fire, there's gas leaking everywhere, you see Keaton is dying. That happens presently. So that's sort of, we know by the end of the movie that scene is true and not narrated. And what gave it away at the beginning for me is you see, so I find the director's sort of giveaway for his clues is he does a very long focused close-up on certain things. And he did right at the beginning a close-up on sort of these spools of ropes and like fish cages and nets and stuff. And it implies that somebody's hiding behind it, but you can very clearly see that there's no way there's anybody hiding behind it. And then when we find out later, when Kevin Spacey, when Kaiser Sose is being interrogated,
he claims he's hiding behind it.
He claims he's hiding behind that. And even when he is recounting to Kuan, the I guess state officer, that, oh, I was hiding behind the ropes. Even when he's recounting it, we see the flashback. They focus on that again, and it zooms in. It does its close up, and you can still see there's nobody hiding behind it. But when he's recounting it, we should have seen him hiding behind it the second time. But we didn't. So still there was nobody there. So for me, that was the biggest right off the bat. Also in the opening scene, you see the gold lighter. You get a glimpse of the gold watch. And then when Verbal is leaving the precinct, because he's let go, he has his immunity.
That I did notice.
and then they're like, a gold watch, a gold lighter.
A gold lighter, a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah. And then I love that scene right at the end. And you see he's limping away. And
I know,
just how it closes up on the foot and it just slowly starts to correct.
Straightens,
And he just hits that like straight footfall and walks off confidently. That sticks with you.
I remembered vividly that scene. Like as he was leaving, I was just like, oh, his foot's gonna go straight. Like I was like feeling the feels of that much. Yeah. And and then also like Peter Postlethwaite, is that how you pronounce his name? He was Postlethwaite. He was the priest in Romeo and Juliet. So seeing him again, I was just like, oh, I love him.
Can we talk about that character?
That character is very
he's a brilliant actor.
Yeah.
He's
Kobayashi.
Okay, so he's a Caucasian man. Okay. Yeah. He's from England. He's British.
He's not
Why did they make him super tanned and have an Indian British accent?
But again
with a Japanese name. I understand why he had the Japanese name, but why? Right. Why?
But it almost doesn't matter because it's completely in the memory of like it's not real, and B,
it's likely made up.
It's completely in the memory or like the mindset of Kevin Spacey. So the cop doesn't know, like he could have been anyone. He could have been anyone or anything. Like it's just.
So it was those maybe red herrings for the viewers.
Yeah, it was distracting.
You have like a very blue-eyed, like poorly tanned guy with an Indian accent. I'm like,
why the Indian? Yeah, I didn't understand the accent.
But I think maybe it's because it was supposed to be like, hey, this is being made up.
Yeah, maybe.
Right. Like it's so obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about that as soon as you said that, Nat, and because I just watched it today, and Kobayashi, they're in that. Okay, so the usual suspects, they dress up, they pretend to be maintenance people, and they get into that. I think was it Kobayashi's office space or something?
Yeah, they break into his office to threaten him and say that they're going to kill him. Yeah.
Well, they were going to kill him, but
they're going to kill him.
Yeah.
And then he goes through the whole thing of, well, you did this, and cause my boss will get you because you stole this money, and it was supposed to go towards some deal in Pakistan. They mentioned Pakistan a couple of times.
They do,
I noticed.
Yeah.
And I think they also mentioned India, so I'm thinking maybe that was some sort of tie-in there that he's, some international business dealer or something.
Yeah.
I just let the casting. I was like, why'd they cast this white man for this part? Like,
because it
really,
was
like, how many people are from India that they could have given this part to? Just a few billion, but whatever.
Well, that was one of the tip-offs to me. Was like he has a Japanese name, and he, isn't Japanese. Not that you can't have a name and not, be that from that race or something, but it was sort of like incongruent.
It was
so obviously awkward.
Yeah.
Right. Like
and that was weirdly like that was one thing I didn't remember from the original time watching it. I was like I knew all of the names and the big moments and whatever. Like you remember all the iconic quotes and everything that are from this movie, but I was like couldn't remember who played that role. Like he was just kind of invisible in my mind, my memory, and then he walked in and I was like, huh. Did not remember that it was you playing this. A little weird, like not what I thought / remembered. But maybe that's just part of making throwing people off or making people think or maybe making people think that maybe maybe it is him. Like his character, it could have just as easily been him, I guess, really, right? Because
Right.
he knows all the information. He's the middle guy. Like he's the, they make a lot of comments that Kaiser Soze never keeps anyone on staff. Like he always has different people.
A long time.
So like, yeah, if I hadn't already known, and I don't remember what I thought when I was originally watching it. So, but I feel like I probably would have thought that it was him all the way through, or at least had moments where I thought it was him.
Yeah.
Doc thinks
what I
it was
loved
their
is
confusion.
when I loved when he came in. So the thing in LA goes wrong. Now they're all hiding in some sort of like luxury suite with a pool table or whatever, wherever they are.
Yeah, wherever
he
they are.
hands them a briefcase. Two things. When they open the briefcase and Keaton is handing out envelopes to everybody, all the envelopes have their name on it. And as he hands it to each person, it's actually their death order that comes shortly thereafter that. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Also, I just thought because the actor that plays Keaton is Irish, and I thought it was just kind of funny that I'm like, of course the Irish guy is really nervous to open a random briefcase that somebody.
Yeah, he's like, I'm good. Yeah, I'm
he's like super nervous about it. I'm like, yeah, not too far from the Troubles, this movie. So, I mean, I know that was actually not part of it, but I was just like, in my head, I kind of giggled because I was like, yep, the Irish guy would be nervous about that random briefcase.
And you know, that was another thing that was, I think, clever, the way the writer kind of gave you some ideas of, there's some possible other people that Kaiser Soze could be. And one of them was Keaton's role. Keaton, Gabriel Byrne, is that who played that character?
Yeah, Gabriel Byrne, yeah.
Because Kujan, is it Kujan? It's Kujan, right?
Yes, I don't know. Yeah, it's a J, but I have no idea.
Silent J.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of
we all agree. It's great.
we all agree. He was trying to remember when they had the, all the interrogations with Kent, and he was saying, well, I know it's Keaton.
Yeah, he was sure. Like he was sure he knew everything. And he thought he was just going to get confirmation for it. Was the yeah.
And Kent played that really well, Kevin Spacey's character. Throughout the whole thing, at the beginning, he's like, no, I know Keaton's innocent. Like, he went straight, he's innocent. And then it's like, well, he went straight for this girl, this lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, the lawyer knows everything about this whole corrupt world.
Yeah.
Well, the lawyer knows everybody to get us all off from this. Like, I have really good lawyers. And it's like, well, no, maybe he was more involved. Oh, no, he's Kaiser Soze, he did it. Mm-hmm. So throughout the whole movie, Kent is sort of slow rolling this confirmation to Kuan that it's Keaton, but I mean, we know it wasn't, but
right.
But I thought that was really interesting.
I agree, and I think Kuyan was also gunning for Keaton because he was a dirty cop and all the stuff that he had gotten away with, and all the murders and this and that and the other that were kind of swept underneath the rug. So he was gunning for Keaton from the beginning of the movie too. So maybe he had some blinders on.
Well, that goes back to like the famous quote that comes out of this movie, where it's like, the greatest thing that the devil ever did was convincing the world that he didn't exist, right? Like that. Yeah,
Baudelaire. It's a 19th century author. Okay. It's a paraphrase.
All right.
It wasn't the scriptwriter that came up with one of the most brilliant lines in cinema. It was actually a paraphrase from an existing author.
That's done our homework. I found that too.
But it is like, that theme is kind of, not surprisingly goes all the way through this movie, right? Like the reason that Kevin Spacey is able to get away with all of it is because he's invisible. Like everyone already has all of their preconceived notions because these men were all criminals. The cops have like notions as to who they think it is or what they think happened. There's there's so many different levels of criminal, like all the way through, like everyone that was involved in the ship. Like it was like, oh, well, that was a drug deal. Like it takes them like a very long time to like kind of put away their preconceived notions, and by the time they do, he's gone. Like there's like, so it totally does kind of play into that entire idea that like if you can kind of slip between all of these people's preconceived notions, you don't exist. Like no one is paying any attention to what he's doing because everyone already has a story that they've made up of what happened and why. And it's like, well, this was like bound to happen anyway because it was a drug deal and it was, these different like warring criminal groups and they're, and these guys were all like top level criminals that were guilty of all these different things. And this guy is like the smallest, like he's the rat. He's the smallest fish. He's like the least guilty out of all of them, right? Like what he was in jail for was irrelevant compared to everyone else.
He sets it up continuously through all of his interrogations that I'm lame, I'm crippled, I'm dumb, I'm the dumbest one. And he uses that, like, even when he's retelling how he's the one who went to go get Clint, because they said this whole thing wouldn't work if we didn't get Clint in on the heists. And, that's one of those sort of bells that goes off in your head watching. It's like, why is this guy the one going to get Clint? And he uses in that scene his crippleness, his lameness, to garner like sympathy and trust.
Yeah.
And he did that with the police too. So it's like a device that he used more than once, which was really cool.
Absolutely. And it's really the perfect cover because people, they are assuming because he's crippled that he's dumb or stupid or something, and that he couldn't possibly be some great mastermind, right? It's a perfect cover for him.
Yeah. I will say, like, he deserved this Oscar at this time anyway. he really, like, he did a really fantastic job with this role. He's like, somehow throughout this movie you feel bad for him, even knowing he did it all the way through. You sort of like, you watch it and you're like, oh well, like everyone ignored him, like, they should have been like they were pitying him, they were treating him differently, they were like, doing all of these things to him, but they let it all happen as a result. Like,
he manipulated them.
He manipulated all of them to do it. Yeah, it's just kind of it's definitely a really, really well done film. So, Kimberly, I'm interested because from this moment we started the podcast, this was like a few others he recommended as well, but this was one you said over and over again. Is this your favorite movie?
It's one of them from that time period. I mean, there was a bunch of movies that came out around that time. This one, Shawshank Redemption. There's like several movies in that came out that I really love because I just think that, the screenplay, and I know that the writer won an Academy Award for the screenplay.
He did, yep.
I just loved how it had these layers, and it was, you can't watch the movie and kind of be doing other stuff and running off and not paying attention because I've watched it several times. I watched it earlier today, and I was taking all these notes. There's so much, and there's so many things that I still are just, oh my God, there's that little piece, and oh yeah, there's that. And they say these little one-off lines, but they're hugely significant, in the whole story, in the larger story. And I just love the writing, to be honest with you. I think it's one of the best movies from that time period.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, the writing's fantastic. I have to say, Katie was saying at the beginning, she's like, there's nothing in this that led me to believe it was verbal. And I was like, okay. She's like, because in the sort of wrap up at the end where the police officer or the state officer is like, oh my God, he's looking at the billboard. He sees all of the clues. He looks at the coffee cup. He sees, and he starts to piece it all together. I'm like, well, no, right at the beginning when he's dragged into, so he didn't want to go into an interrogation room, which was really smart on Verbal's part. He went into this office. It was the chief of police's office. And he's sitting there alone for a moment. And you see, again, the director with his little close-ups. So you could see he's looking at the Rolodex. He's looking at the Turkish cigarette box. He's tracking slowly through the bulletin board. And then somebody comes in. Yeah. And of course, like when they do it, you can't see what's on the bulletin board, but that he's picked up, like you could tell by that slowness, the close-ups, that's where he's picking up information.
Yeah, I guess for me, I was just so focused on this time watching it, I was so focused on knowing that it was him and realizing like how unreliable the story was. And then I feel like when I got to the very end, and and he's already gone, and the police realize that it was him, and then it zooms in on like all of the things that were in his story, right? So like the bottom of the cup is a Kobayashi cup, so like it's everything is made up, right? And I was like, I just like I don't know, I'm feeling really ripped off because I didn't feel as though it, like, not that there weren't clues like and hints throughout it that it was him, but I felt like I was like, well, there's no way that the audience like the audience didn't have that view, and you don't see those details until the very end. So like you could know it's him from other things, but I feel like you didn't like those things could have been anything in the audience. Like it felt a little scapegoaty to me, like, and maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just missed those moments earlier, but I was like, it felt a little convenient at the end that it was like his whole story is a lie anyway. So like, there's no way you could have figured it out, like unless you were staring at this board at the end and you were like, oh shoot, like all of the names. But
for me, I was like, okay, well, tell me about the billboard, like, or the bulletin board. I'm like, what? Also, the Rolodex. I'm like, well, why did he focus at the Rolodex? But they never explain that.
Yeah, they never
editing. They might not have used it, but
they may not have used it.
But I was like, but I was like, I thought about that the whole movie. I'm like, the bulletin board. What's on the bulletin board?
Show us the bulletin board.
The whole movie.
But you know what?
Like, bulletin board.
In watching it for the 10th time today, I was really paying attention because I wanted to, catch those early things. And there was a lot going on early on.
Yeah,
kind of tips off that he's a big deal. Like when they talk about, the setup was you've got 2 hours to interrogate him because he's trying to make bail to get out, and
it came from on top too.
And it came from on top. It was like the mayor is involved. And the governor is involved, and the cop. I don't remember the name of the police officer whose office it was, but he was saying this guy's a big deal. I don't know really what's going on, and I don't remember that from watching it those other previous times.
Yeah.
So this time I was like, the setup was, who is this person, and why is this little 2-bit con?
Yeah. Why is this guy such a big deal?
Favors called in,
It made me think at the beginning when they're all brought in on these trumped up charges, and they say it too. It's like, why would they put all of us in a lineup together? That's not how lineups work. Usually it's one of us at a time with a bunch of other 2-bit criminals. Like, why? And then they put them all in a cell together. And it's like, where did this trumped up charge come from? Well, it came from like way on top. So I'm like, did Kaiser Sose do that from the beginning to get these criminals in place? Like, I feel like he did it from... Like, they didn't meet by accident. I feel like it was all orchestrated.
It was all a con, all along con. Doc makes a good point. Maybe Kobayashi is an homage to the Kobayashi Maru. Yeah, I think it is like
it's the impossible mission.
Yeah, I think it's a lot. I think there were a ton of layers in it. Like like not catching the Verbal's name, like that, the Turkish word, right, is like, I think it actually translates, or at least this article,
only because of Google,
was to blabbermouth, right? Like it's kind of funny. Like now we live in a world where we can live fact check while we're watching things, or or ask those questions. It is kind of amazing that I think some of the most, I would argue that some of the most kind of jaw-dropping, like mind-bending, twisty, turny movies came out at a time before we were able to look up a lot of this information. So it's huge props to the screenwriters who, like, that would be incredibly difficult to, like, you would have to write all of that well, and then you would have to work really, really closely with the director and the producer and the actors to make all the visual cues go into that as well, because none of that necessarily, like, you can have like written indicators in a screenplay that say, like, at this point we need to zoom in and whatever else, but that screenwriter would have needed to have worked really closely with a great director
was on
to
set.
Say that. Yeah, like
he was on
a lot
set,
would have to go together.
He had a cameo in the movie too. It was somewhere in LA, one of a spectator or something. But yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's true. Like, they did, it was an era where you just didn't buy somebody's script. You just didn't buy the rights to something. It's like you worked. It's kind of almost like I feel like almost like a bygone era. It's not something that they necessarily need to do anymore. I mean, nowadays we could just zoom someone in.
Yeah.
Like digital video call. Does this look okay?
I know, exactly. Call a friend, phone a friend, right?
I was telling Katie too, it's like, I only thought to look it up in the origin of the name because I'm rewatching it and because, I'm on a computer. It's not like then I could have just been like, I'm going to pause the film, run to the public library, hope they have a Turkish book, like some sort of Turkish dictionary or encyclopedia. Like my public library is pretty good in Montreal, but like, I don't know if it was that good then. So.
But it was interesting because there was a lot of those little Easter eggs that, like I said, I didn't catch the other 8 times that I've watched it, but I definitely caught this time. And one of them was, they're at the ship, the shipyard scene where they're about to, go in there and try to pull off that deal that turned out to really not be the deal that they thought. And they're in the truck, and it's Verbal and I think it's Keaton, and they could hear the mobsters that were walking around, the security speaking a language. And then Keaton says, "What language is that? Is that Russian?" And then Kaiser Soze says Hungarian, and he kind of just keeps on going, and doesn't make a big deal about it. It's like, how would he know, right?
He does say Hungarian, pauses, and then you can see he smirks again. Little close up, little smirk, and he's like, "I think."
Yeah,
right.
I did notice that this time around. Yeah. There was little. There definitely were a ton of Easter eggs. This is one of those movies that you're right. I think I could probably go back and watch even 20 times and pull different things out of it.
You're always going to pick up other little stuff on it.
It's funny. The only other thing that I can think of that's that layered, and it's a totally different genre, is the TV show Arrested Development, where I feel like every time I watch that show, it's funny on a different level. Like you miss a different weird slapstick thing that's happening in the background, or like a double entendre that an actor is saying that you didn't really notice the first time around, or you don't really realize or appreciate until you've seen the episodes back to back a number of times. There's not a lot of TV or movie content out there that is able to hold up that long, and even when the twist, still be fascinating. Sixth Sense, I guess, is probably another one, but even that one, once the twist, it's you might watch it through one more time to see if you can catch it and if it makes sense. But I feel like it's not, you probably don't really want to watch it 10 or 20 times. I don't think you would pick up as much as you do in this one. So again, just incredible screenwriting all the way through to make, Paul said the same thing, kind of I see dead people and it's red. Yeah. No, exactly.
You know what other movies like that? And it's one of my all-time favorite, Willy Wonka, the original Willy Wonka.
Oh, yeah, the original Willy Wonka.
You go back and you hear him dropping all these little gems here and there and these little quotes, references and stuff. So,
yeah, and Gene Wilder was amazing. That's a movie, I know they're going to remake it again, and I'm just leave it alone. Nobody's Gene Wilder.
Which one was good?
Okay,
Gene Wilder. Yeah, I know. They've remade that one
the original.
Yeah.
The original.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best one. And they can't recreate it the way that they did. Also, the Oompa Loompas are just on a whole other level. I love that movie.
All right, I wanted to talk about.
Oh, go for it.
Sorry.
No, go.
I was going to say, I wanted to talk about, that key critical moment when, because, they had the hospital scene, we got the burn victim.
Yep.
And he survived. So, he didn't get wiped out. The one person that could identify him.
I know, this poor guy. Yeah.
Poor guys, all the pressure. And so they, they have the sketch artist that's
the translator. Yep.
Get the description of him. And then I think the FBI agent, Jack Baer, he, calls over to the police. And they're like, the guy can identify him. And he says it's Kaiser Soze. And then Kuyan rushes into the office and says to Kent, they know it was Kaiser Soze. And then he pounds on the desk. Yeah. And that's one of the moments where I realize, wow, he knows that they're getting close, and he almost slips up.
Yeah.
Because why would he care, that it's Kaiser Soze, right? Why would he have such a strong reaction?
Why would he even know? Yeah, why would he even really no, I guess because he's in the criminal world, but it's why would he even really know who that is? This guy is supposed to have been a ghost for years and years and years and years. So
devil himself.
Yeah, why would that be relevant to him in that moment? Yeah. Yeah, it is. It did also make me think the difference between the level of suspense you were able to do in a movie that took place in this time period versus now, because it's you have the translator and the sketch artist, right? And they're in that hospital room, and it's then they get the sketch. Then they have to take the sketch back to the office, and then they fax it, and then it's coming through the fax machine, right? As the guy is getting away, and
it's looking at it, didn't fall into the wastebasket or get crumpled up behind the machine.
These days, it would have been like a text or call directly to him, and he would have been oh, it's you. It would have been over, right? Yeah. And it was like, even like, yeah, you're just like, I love, like, that's the one time period where you're just like, yeah, fax machines, like making whodunits amazing, like since however long. Like it's always like the picture coming through in the fax machine. You're like, oh no, see it.
Oh
like,
my
But
God.
it's funny because back then that was high tech. Like that, they got to see that it was him right away.
Yeah.
Like they still had a chance to run out of the police station and chase him down. They didn't get him, but like they were this close. Whereas like if it was somebody who had to drive it across town or fly it across the country,
right?
Yeah,
a messenger.
Well, that's how I mean that's how like serial killers like Bundy got away for so long, because none of the police stations in all these different cities that he was operating in communicated with each other, because there was no level of technology for them to do so. So it was just like, and then I'm just going to change cities, and now I'm a brand new person. It's there was like it is an interesting device that wouldn't work as easily, or would feel a little bit weirder in today's society than it did then. But I do love, Doc says, now when they do this, they show the last text come in on the unattended phone. Yeah, but is any phone unattended? Like we all have like smart watches and like I even when my phone is somewhere
ankle
else,
bracelets.
Like, yeah, exactly. I feel like my wrist vibrating. I'm like, oh no, someone's trying to call me. Yeah, it's a different
Apparently when Kint falls out of his seat, when Kuan is like yelling at him, he's like, did you kill Keaton? Did you kill Keaton? And he's screaming. He's like, I did. And because Kuan is yelling so loudly, we don't hear it. But apparently if you slow it down with our digital technology, you could hear Kint actually say, I did it. Yeah. I did it. I killed Keaton. Yeah. So apparently he does say it, but they make it hard to, like, they make it basically impossible for you to say. So he does slip up more than once. It's just funny that it took all the cops that long to figure it out.
Yeah.
Right, but Kuyan, he had, blinders on. He was convinced. I mean, he was going after Keaton, so he's like, he didn't care really too much about Kint.
Yeah, he was certain that Keaton was alive and that he was guilty. So yeah, it was.
Yeah, and apparently, if you slow down the frames too, when they're recounting, Kaiser Sose puts on the hat and he has the trench coat and he's smoking the cigarette, and there's the smoke in him. Apparently, a couple of frames, because it shows Keaton, but a couple of frames are Kevin Spacey, also.
Oh, interesting.
So, I read about that. I didn't actually slow the movie down.
Well, now that you say that, I'm going to go back, because that there's that one scene where Verbal is retelling the legend of Kaiser Sose, and talk about the whole issue with the families, and being his wife being raped and the children being hurt and all that. And so he goes after everybody, all the mobs, all the gangsters, and kills their family. And then there's that one picture where you see like a young Kaiser Sose with that long black hair, and it's kind of flowing out, and I'm like, is that Kevin?
You're like, is that Kevin Spacey? It doesn't look like Kevin
I don't
Spacey.
know. That's a good point. We're gonna have to go back and look at that.
Go back.
They just like, they didn't have the technology to make it like, they're like, just find an actor that looks like him. It'll be fine. Oh man,
I gotta go back now, because it's just such a iconic shot, right? This like flames in the background and all this craziness, and he comes out, this long flowing hair, looking like world, underground gangster #1. So I'm gonna have to go back and look at that.
Yeah. No, I have to say the movie was really well done, very well written. Even the not Alec Baldwin did pretty good.
Not Alec Baldwin.
One of the Baldwin boys.
Well, really, only one of them is known to be a good actor in the family. So
that's true. I do. So a couple of fun facts that I thought were worth mentioning, and I know Kimberly has some too here. But the name Kaiser Sose, the first, last, or the full name, is said 75 times throughout the movie, while the name Dean Keaton, first, last, or full name, is said 68 times. So it's mentioned a lot, which is why I think it sticks in everyone's head. Yeah. And then we mentioned this before, but we'll repeat it for Doc because he was late. Oh, just kidding. So it says, in The Usual Suspects, Kevin Spacey's character explains that his nickname is Verbal because he talks too much. In the commentary, Singer points out that the nickname is a clue since Kaiser Sose is said to have a Turkish mother and a German father. According to Singer and Natalie, a mix of German and Turkish, Kaiser Sose can roughly be translated to King Blabbermouth. So yeah, it is definitely a really layered movie. And Doc was fact checking you, Nat, and he said that you are correct. Fact, it was indeed Charles Baudelaire in 1864, the original devil quote.
Yeah, it's called The General Gambler. Was
there you go.
The story it was taken from. Yeah.
There you go. I'm just scrolling through to make sure I don't miss any other fun stuff. Scott Morgan is the flashback Kaiser, so it's not Kevin Spacey, and maybe they just didn't even care to make it look like him. They're like, this guy's badass. Let's make him
Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey doesn't really look the part to be that level. He's
not somebody that comes across as badass.
Yeah, he's not like the badass, like super criminal. I believe he's a maniacal, devious person, but I don't believe he's a super
sociopathic. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Sociopathic. Yes. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, we're nearing the end, so people in the live studio audience, thank you for hanging out with us. If you have a rating, you need to drop in how many potatoes you think it is. And thanks for hanging out this time around. I see we had like a good crew. We had Paul in the chat, even though Kimberly wasn't there. We had Paul, we had Doc, we had George hanging out with us. Tom swung by, so it's awesome. Good news, everyone. You can apparently buy the Kobayashi mugs on Amazon, so I expect everyone to have one for next time. We can hold it up on the bottom. That might be a fun Christmas Christmas gift idea for everyone.
Before we get out, we didn't talk about the one female character in the story, the lawyer.
Oh my goodness, we didn't. All right,
remember? Edie Finneran, Keaton's girlfriend.
It was a little depressing that they just I guess I was sort of hoping that she was just gone, but then they do fully kill her off in the movie, which is kind of depressing.
Yeah, which was why did he kill her off? What was the
what was the point of that?
Excessive?
She wasn't. Yeah, she wasn't really in the way.
Did she know? Is there something that we missed? I was like, oh, why'd they have to kill her?
Yeah.
Right. Right. I kind of thought about that too. And I think maybe that's Kaiser's style. He kind of wipes out everybody.
He wipes out everyone,
no loose ends, or something.
Do you think,
except for that one at the hospital,
that Keaton actually went straight for her?
Yes.
That's a good question.
I kind of think he did. Again, we have no concept since we're sort of seeing him through someone else, but yeah, I felt like he did.
I felt just the whole recounting of how Verbal had to go and convince Keaton.
Yeah, he kept trying to back out. Yeah.
Yeah, and he really had to garner a lot of sympathy for him to come in, and and the whole time Verbal was very aware of the girlfriend, and when they found out that Kobayashi had the girlfriend, you could see Verbal was really shocked.
Yeah.
And so it's I feel like it must have been true, because otherwise why would they have meant there's no other reason to mention it. And I feel also for Kaiser Sose that would have been just an extra layer of coup for him to drag somebody who's so far out of it back in. And he did really need him so he could break up the police ring. So
true.
That's right. I thought it was interesting that you never really found out what type of business Keaton was really doing, because he got busted at that restaurant with those. They were speaking French, and they were some kind of deal, and Edie was there, but you never really knew what he was trying to do with his clean self.
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't tell if it was. I feel like they had mentioned hotel and restaurant, but it wasn't. Again, it wasn't clear. He was looking for investors, and then we know because they got dragged in that it ruined his reputation.
Yeah.
So.
Her French was very bad. That was all I noticed from that scene. I was like, oh man, she's not doing well. Someone help her.
She was like, wait,
the guy's accent was good, but
the guy's acting was good. Yeah. Yeah.
That's one thing I notice sometimes when you see movies, and it's like, why'd they even try?
Yeah.
Just get a
You
voiceover.
could use overdub, folks.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Just voiceover.
Sometimes, why'd they do that?
Oh. All right. Well, Doc says 42 potatoes. Kimberly, how many potatoes would you give this one?
I'll give it 50 just because it's just such a
50.
such a well-written screenplay. Love it.
Absolutely.
You know, it there none of the characters are people that you would invite over for dinner or want to
we don't want to know
hang out
any
with
of these people. Yeah.
I still felt bad when they started getting bumped off, though.
Yeah, I know.
Poor Kevin Pollak.
I know. I always feel bad for. I feel bad for those.
Kevin Pollak, even though he often plays a bad guy, I tend to always like him. He's very sympathetic.
Yeah, he is.
I don't know why.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I put 4, but now I may have to do a 5. 1 sec. We got it.
Oh no, for me it's a 5 out of 5.
All right,
Other
5.
than in Doc, you missed at the
go.
beginning. We did a disclaimer that we know a lot of people in this movie should be jailed. Like we know that.
Yeah, Doc is echoing.
We're not talking about it.
We're just gonna for the purposes of this movie review show, we're gonna pretend that they're not terrible people just for a second.
For the purposes of not ruining a phenomenally written and acted movie.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because it's, I've had to have conversations with other people about this, some artists and musicians that you love, and they have this dark side. And it's like, how do you appreciate the art and separate that out from the possible crimes that they've done?
And sometimes I can't. I even told Katie yesterday, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to watch this one.
Yeah, now was on the fence about rewatching it.
I was really in the feels about it, but I did. Yeah. And I'm like, it is good. And yesterday, I had forgot that Bryan Singer directed and produced this. And I was like, it's just like, it's just one of those people that do that terrible thing to small people movie. It's a group effort on this. I
just don't, I guess
it's too bad.
I agree with all of that. I guess from my perspective, it is tricky because there's so many, like, the screenwriter, the other actors, the like everything that went into making this movie, it's just like crummy to delete this movie because of a couple of people being shitty. Like I don't know. I like when it comes to that, like if it was like if it was like only one of them and they were responsible for everything, like if it was a piece of art and it was their art, okay, maybe I could kind of understand the idea of like wanting to remove that piece of art from memory or like, removing them. But it's like a movie or it's such a collaborative effort. Like this movie would not have been successful if it wasn't for each person that was involved in it. It's just so it feels like it makes what they did so much worse because in addition to like ruining the lives of the people who they were awful to, it also like ruins like the memory and the hard work of everyone that was involved in these films. And that's like
because it's not one person, it's a whole crew.
Person. Yeah, it's a whole crew. Like it's just
totally. But having said that, what movie of his I won't watch is American Beauty because that's like way too close to
that is actually same. It's one of those ones. Problems. With American Beauty, it's funny because I feel like that was one of those movies where I just, not that I didn't like it, but there was something about that film that has never like sat right with me, and I don't really know what. Like I couldn't place. So like that one's I'm actually like okay with not wanting to rewatch. Like
to borrow a more British expression, it just gave me the ick.
Yeah, it gave me the ick. Yeah, it gave something about that movie gives me the ick. Yeah, it is not a good one.
Yeah, it's hard. There's a lot of stuff, especially now everything it's easier to find out and but there are some artists regardless that you can't help but love what they've produced even though you wish they would rot in Dante's Inferno.
Or Kaiser Soze's Inferno, right?
He seems like
he used a lot of fire.
Like he could solve this problem.
I mean, like they did say fairly often that he's the devil himself. So.
Right. Devil incarnate. And I love how the movie ends where he repeats that line, and then one day he'll be gone. And which is so interesting that they didn't do a sequel or there wasn't, another movie featuring Kaiser Soze.
I feel like it was just so it had such raging success that they couldn't, it was, and I'm glad it was a time where people are like, let's just leave it stand alone because it was so big and it was so good that anything else we do would tarnish it, you know?
Yep.
So
One and done.
One and done.
Yeah.
Well, I can scratch this off my list. I don't have to keep putting this in your comments. Because you're always like, what movie? I'm like, The Usual Suspects.
The Usual Suspects. I'm really like, come on, The Usual Suspects. Yeah, no, we have a huge, a nonstop list, and I think I have to move to Wednesday next week, Nat, because
that's fine.
I keep having Thursday things that keep slamming into my schedule. So sorry, everyone.
I do want to say that since this is Pride Month, I would like to do
Birdcage.
Birdcage next week.
I'm in for that one.
Because that was phenomenal. I never not find that movie funny.
A laugh. Yeah, I'm in for a laugh.
Yeah, let's lighten it up.
Because I was about to say Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah,
like, let's laugh a little bit, please.
Yeah, we'll do Birdcage and then we'll jump back into Shawshank. Is definitely on the list. That one
definitely on the list.
That one.
That's
phenomenal.
one of the ones that I've watched once. There's some movies that are just so heavy. I'm like, I watched it once. I will never forget it. I don't know if I'll go back there, but I will for the podcast. The one I will not rewatch for this podcast or anybody is Beaches. Because I have never ugly cried so much like Claire Danes than watching the movie Beaches.
I
don't know it looked up
too.
So
I cried everything these days. I can't even get through like emails from people, random things I see in the street. I'm just like an open crier.
Did you cry through Usual Suspects?
I did not. Thankfully I did not cry through Usual Suspects.
Did you cry when guys are walked out?
Oh my gosh, no! But I'm definitely becoming my dad. My dad used to and probably still does. Would pause every. We watched a lot of movies growing up. We had endless family movie nights, and he was amazing at watching everything with us, which was great. But he would pause every single movie and ask detailed questions. And because he worked in aviation, he would also
if there was a plane in it.
Yeah, he would
have
pause.
to look it up and tell us the whole. Everything from the origin of the plane, how it was built, what type of engineers built it.
He was Google for us. Yeah, he would see a plane and he'd be like, he's like, see that plane there? And we'd be like, yeah. And then he would unpause it and then pause it again when it was the inside of the plane. He'd be like, that's not the same plane. We'd be like, well, what's the inside of the plane? He's like, no, that's and he could list the detail, that's a blah, blah, blah plane. And that one is a da, da, da plane. We're like, oh, all right, fair enough.
Awesome.
It was amazing. So I didn't cry my way through it, but I definitely am becoming more like him, where I was watch it, didn't pause the movie, but I was definitely with my phone looking up how old is Kevin Spacey? What what movies was Peter Postlethwaite in? I was looking up all the details of also it had nothing to do with the movie at all. It was just in my phase of knowing all the facts about everything.
And then she gets to the end and she's like, who did it again?
I know. Then I got to the end. I was like, I know that he did it, but I have no idea why. I wasn't paying it all attention. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for having me on, ladies. I had a blast.
Oh, it was so much fun.
Come back anytime. And I will say, Doc and I had 2 amazing ideas. And see, Doc, now I'm putting it in the podcast, so it's legit. On this week's episode of the Flow podcast that Doc and I do on Tuesdays, we were using the VHS Club as an example because we were talking about how to set up a video podcast in 2023. So we went through the checklist of setting up this podcast, and Doc suggested 2 different things that I'm holding him to. I will help set up one. So the first is build a Notion board, so that we can put our movie list on, and people can put their comments and fun facts and whatever under the movies, so we can collaborate. I am 100% there. I will build that. And then the second thing he did during the episode, and I was like, we need Doc to do this for us, Nat. He started saying, he was like, in a world where there are no video stores. And I was like, we need Doc to do a fun, crazy
Doc needs to do sound bites
movie
for us.
Phone sound bites that we can use for intros and ads. Doc, I'm looking at you.
Totally.
Yeah, Doc.
Get on it, man.
Get on it. But yeah, we will definitely do Notion. I know Doc also suggested Discord for group watching parties, which could be really fun too. But I'll start with Notion so we can compile.
I had a poor experience with Discord
last night. Not had a bad experience with Discord. We have to lure her back into Discord. It can be a really fun place. It's hard to stream too, but it's fun for watch parties. So
all right,
it might be good for that. It might be good.
Yeah, we should do a live watch party one time with the movie.
I know. Except I tend to think I have a lot of time until next week, and then it's Tuesday, and I'm like, all right, tonight or tomorrow I'm gonna watch the movie, and then it's like Thursday morning, and I'm like, okay, now I really need to watch the movie. So I don't know if I could commit to a watch party. It might be bad. I might. Yeah.
That happened to me today. I was like, I was so torn between the submersible and all that news, and I had to finish watching this, and I was
there
like,
were a
oh
lot
my
of
God.
TikToks to watch. Yeah.
I am one of the people that is finding it, I don't want to say funny, because people died, obviously, but you got Darwined, okay? Darwin took care of you.
No, it was
you are stomping on people's graves. Just, you got what you got. I'm sorry. I did like the whole theory that the wild orcas were the ones that took out the submersible, but it seems that it was more, the fact that it was a rinky-dink, not really fully approved, run with a PlayStation remote problem. Rich people thinking they're invincible problem.
Yep.
But
yeah, and I'm like, okay, $250,000. Give me $500 and I'll hook you up. Okay,
it costs. Just the recovery. The recovery missions are costing millions of dollars. Up until today, where they found a piece of it and they said it definitely blew from pressure. I'm like, that already cost us millions of taxpayer dollars, both in Canada, the US, the UK.
And we all could have just watched Titanic, which is on the list. I'm like, James Cameron did a lot of overpriced research.
A submersible.
He had the submersible built. Why didn't they use his submersible?
Rent the movie, guys. What are you doing? You're grave robbing is what you're doing.
Yeah.
We were talking. Pulled up like a case of champagne. I'm like, oh, literally robbing a grave. I'm like, I'm sorry, you got it. You got what you deserved. Like, this is a horror movie. Yeah. Who does that? Who robs a grave? I mean, granted, the only people that died down there were poor people, but
who sits in a tin can that's been bolted shut from the outside? I mean, there's a lot of questions that I have about that whole thing. So
why is it a game console remote control? It's a game console remote control to drive the. Oh God. Anyways, it's one of the most spectacular examples of Darwinism that I've seen in a very long time. I'm sure it'll go down in the book of Darwin Awards.
Totally. And the sad part about it, I heard that the 19-year-old, son, he didn't really want to go, and he was terrified. And so I feel sorry for him. He was trying to please his father or something.
That's awful. I do actually. I feel bad about the loss of human life, but for sure. Just.
Well, now we need an upbeat, fun fact or something to go out on. This is too depressing to end. All right, hang on. Scroll through my fun facts again. Is there one that we can go out on? Because that's not good.
Let's see. The emeralds in the movie were really pretty. They were green. They were gorgeous.
Yes,
they were pretty.
I like emeralds.
Oh, okay. Here's an interesting one that we can go out on. Legendary film critic Robert Ebert gave The Usual Suspects 1.5 stars. 1.5 potatoes, you guys. He famously wrote, "To the degree that I do understand, I don't care," which is kind of badass.
Interesting.
Just interesting. Just interesting. And then here's another fun one. Redfoot flicks his cigarette at McManus, and it was supposed to hit him in the cheek. Cigarettes aren't the most accurate projectile, and the cigarette hit Stephen Baldwin directly in the face. His general reaction is in The Usual Suspects film.
All of them. You could even see like Benicio del Toro was like, because he actually got like burnt in the face. And Doc's comments, I am 100%. I agree with you.
No, we're not going back into it.
No, we're not going back into it. But I just want Doc to know. I'm like, yeah.
Well, on that note, huge thank you to Kimberly for hanging out. Come back anytime. We will be back Wednesday next week. We're going to do the Birdcage. If you want to find this podcast, you can always catch us live on Wednesdays or Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. You can watch replays all the time on YouTube whenever you want, and the podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Usually Fridays is when it drops, but you can backtrack and stay tuned for our brand new shiny coming soon list where you can leave your own feedback and drop all your favorite movies on the list, and then we'll force you to come on to the episode with us. Kimberly nailed it. So you have like big shoes to fill. Like Chris was like really prepared last week. So it's been, the guests have been more prepared than Natalie and I. So the precedent is set, everyone. You gotta step it up.
You gotta watch the movie.
I can't wait for you guys to see my list because I wrote it just.
We should
leave it the way I wrote it. It's not in any order other than just how these movies popped into my brain. Perfect. So you guys can get the inner workings of it's like.
You could have a voting, an upvoting or downvoting system. Yeah, we could really go all in for craziness.
All I did was like certain words or movie quotes triggered other movies to enter my head. So it's just a random list of nonsensical order.
I love it.
It'll be fun for you guys.
I absolutely love it. All right. Well, I'm looking at you, Paul. You need to tell us what movie you want to come on for because you've been here from the beginning. So you get to pick. But Doc agrees. He says Paul's next. All right, everyone. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Hey.